America. From the soundstage of the Old Tucson Movie Studios in Tucson, Arizona, I'm Vic Caputo. Welcome to Speak Up America, the television show. Speak Up America. Today, pleased to welcome the editor and publisher of Destiny magazine, Emanuel McLittle. And now, here's your host, Chuck Diaz.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you to the first Speak Up America show. It's been a long time coming, and I hope it's a long time running, actually. I'd like to reintroduce myself. My name is Chuck Diaz. I happen to be I'm an American of Mexican descent. I'm not a Hispanic. I'm not a Latino. And I'm certainly not a Mexican-American. Congress created those things as far as I'm concerned, because back when I was born, I wasn't told that I was one of these other things. I happen to be born and raised in what is now called South Central Los Angeles, and I've got to admit that things may have been different then, and I grew up on a block that actually I believe only had 3 quote-unquote Mexican families on the block. But I grew up in an atmosphere that nobody was telling me that I was different. Nobody was telling me that I couldn't succeed. Nobody was telling me that America wasn't the place that I think it is. I happen to love this country very much. And a couple of years ago, I started a little newspaper called Speak Up America. Speak Up America is dedicated to a return of common sense in our laws, a return of morality in our decisions, the elimination of any obscenities reaching our kids, and the proliferation of environmental truth. And as soon as we come back from this break that's coming up, I'll expound more on some of those things. Okay? That's it. Thank you very much. I screwed up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As I mentioned in my intro, I happen to have been born in South Central Los Angeles, and things were different back then than they are now. That's for darn sure. But when I started to think about creating a periodical like Speak Up America, I did it as a result of watching C-SPAN, and I happened to have been in an auto accident. And so I was at home a lot, and I was watching C-SPAN. And at that time, I think it was in 1990, when they were discussing the Civil Rights Bill in the House and the Senate, and it was something that Senator Kennedy had said about some Hispanic Americans that came back from World War II or something like that. And I got mad, and I decided at that time to write a letter. So I wrote a letter to the local newspaper in Tucson, Arizona, and it was a letter to the editor. I figured that they were going to chop it up and they were going to, maybe print a couple of paragraphs. They ended up printing all 20 inches of it, and they didn't chop it up at all. Actually, the only thing is they gave it a wrong headline as far as I'm concerned, because they connected it with multilingual things instead of multicultural things. When I started looking into what the problems were, it was really as a result of coming back from Korea. I had been doing some business in Korea, and in my business mode, I don't think I ever really paid a lot of attention to what was going on in America. Then one night I was sitting at the Sheila Hotel, and I happened to be sitting in the cocktail lounge, and there was a Frenchman and a German who were speaking to a Korean bartender. The Frenchman couldn't speak German or Korean, the German couldn't speak French or Korean, and the Korean couldn't speak German or French. But they were speaking to each other in English. And it hit me at that time. I said, you know, it's really something that here are these 3 people who can't speak each other's languages are speaking to each other in English. And yet, you go to the United States and you hear about multiculturalism and kids being taught through school in their own language. I came back and I decided to call the local high school, and I asked them. I said, "Is it possible for a student to go through the school system and graduate without knowing how to speak English?" They wouldn't give me a yes, but they also wouldn't give me a no. So then I started investigating things, and the more I got into race problems or prejudice problems and who the bad guys are and who the good guys are, I started noticing a trend, and the trend was that the media seemed to be part of what was going on, because when you stop to think of it, every one of you learn everything you know from the media. You watch television, you listen to the radio, and you get a media's interpretation. All of a sudden, that reminded me once back in during the Vietnam War, when I was talking to somebody about it, and I can't remember what it was, but I remember what he said. He said, "Well, your media tells you one story, and the rest of the world gets another story." And at that time, I guess I was a little naive or stupid, one of the two, when I got mad at him. I said, "What do you mean our media lies to us? This is America. The media doesn't lie to us." Well, over the years, I found out something different, okay? I find it very incredible that in a country where so many people have died for the freedom that we have, where so many people have died for freedom of the press, where in a country like the former Soviet Union, where the press had to write about a party line, here where people have died for this freedom, the press decides to take a party line. And when you get more and more into that, you start to really realize it. The problem is that as Americans, the busy American who has a job, the busy American who has a family, the busy American who goes to work every day is too busy to investigate what's going on, so they come home and they watch their television set or they read their newspaper, and it's too bad that most of them are convinced about what's going on, or at least they believe it. And it really takes time to study the issue, and that's what most the silent Americans don't have. They don't have time. They're busy working. They're busy buying homes. They're busy raising their family. So when that happens, something else can take over, and I believe that's what has happened here in the United States. In the United States, where we believe the majority rules, the truth is it's the most active minority who rules. And that has happened in the environmental movement. It has happened in the black-white racial movement, where the media has defined a difference of opinion as if I have a difference of opinion with a black person, I'm a racist. If I have a difference of opinion with a gay person, I'm a homophobe. If I have a difference of opinion with a woman, I'm a male chauvinist pig. Racism is now used in every one of those things. When you really come down to it, people all over the world are having differences of opinion. Look at Ireland. What are you going to call them? You have one religion of Irishmen and another religion of Irishmen killing each other. Now that to me is the extreme prejudice. But the main thing is that here in the United States, it's the media. When we come back from break, I'm going to introduce you to a man by the name of Emanuel McLittle, who is the publisher of Destiny magazine. He's a man that you've got to hear. He's a man that's going to talk about black conservatism, even though we both wish that word would go away and we could only call it Americans. But as soon as we come back, I'm going to introduce you to Emanuel McLittle, and right now we're going to have a little piece on the way out to this break from the Speak Up America Dixieland Jazz Band, and they're going to play a tune for you. So we'll be right back right after this.
Thank you. Thank you. If I had been asked to come across the Atlantic Ocean to talk to a group of my fellow citizens about the precious and long fought for right of Americans to speak up, I would have come. So I read the newspapers every day in preparation for Destiny Magazine's next edition. And I don't like the inability of North and South Koreans to speak up to their government. And I don't like the fact that in China, when you speak up, you're liable to go to jail. And I don't like the fact that in the Soviet Union, speaking up causes revolutions. The whole continent is about to disintegrate under those people. A third of Africa is in ruins for the lack of speaking up. And I have born and raised in a generation of blacks who have not been encouraged to speak up in regards to those things that we see going on in our race that is detrimental to what is good for America. So it is of late that I have come to love and appreciate America. And it is not too late for me to say to you and to say to everybody else listening that as we survey the globe that we live on and look at the other countries and the turmoil that exists from Europe to the Asian coast, there's nowhere else for Americans to go if we don't begin to speak up now. We are in turmoil here in America. Agree or disagree, it's possible that we have a gangster in the White House. Agree or disagree, there has been much that has gone on in the way of Congress that most of us have not agreed with. We pay far too many taxes, far too much of our income in taxes. Our children are going to school to learn about those things you and I would not teach them. Religion has practically been banned in all public places. And literally, there's a concept that has floated itself in this country that we now think of as political correctness that has choked the ability of all of us to speak up. How fitting it is that we are in Tucson, Arizona, doing a program on exactly what we need to restore this place, this piece of real estate, unlike any other in the world, to restore what's necessary for it to be here, and not here just in terms of real estate. Here different than it is in Europe. Here different than it is in China. We don't see green Jeeps with troops riding up and down Tucson streets. As bad as the crime problem is in Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia, and Detroit, and Los Angeles, and New York, we still don't have a military that is ruling us yet. But if we don't begin to do what the theme and the soul of this program is all about, speak up, we are not long before we do look at our bedroom windows early in the morning and see troops. Far-fetched. That's exactly what the people in Prague and in Somalia and in two-thirds of the rest of the world thought. We live in a special place here. And one of the things that has most divided us Americans, one of the things that we have been lacking in speaking up about, is the manner in which our country is divided along racial and religious lines. So I stand here as one of those anomalies called black conservatism. I don't like the word, because my brand of conservatism is nothing more than common sense and what's right. So one of these days, I hope that Destiny Magazine writes out the word conservatism and inserts the word dignity, fairness, honesty, no political correctness. Because I adjure you that there is nowhere else in the world that we're going to be able to go and enjoy the kinds of freedoms that only America has shown us. Nowhere else in the world can you and I speak up and criticize the leader of our country. Nowhere else can we go and speak up and determine the policy apparatus that guides all of our lives. And we have been failing in it lately because of the mechanism that we know of as media has served to mislead us, have served to misguide us about what is real and what is not real. And we have a broken sense of reality, and we don't know really what is real and what isn't. So this is an opportunity, whether you're sitting in the audience or behind the camera or blowing on one of those trumpets. This is a unique opportunity to take part in something as lively as what George Washington took part in. The taking back of what America is, the taking back of what America was. And you don't have to do it with guns yet. We don't need guns yet. If we just do this one thing, speak up. If we don't let politicians stand on the floor of Congress and tell us all the time, and we've all heard it, this is what the American people want. They want this law passed. They want to pay this much more taxes. And how many times have we sat in front of our TVs and listened and looked at a screen and listened to a commentator tell us that 60% of the American people think this and 70% of the American people think that. And therefore, we're going to guide the policies that govern this country according to these statistics. How many times have you asked, they didn't ask me, and they didn't ask you, who are these Americans that they're talking about? Speak up, my friends. Embrace this notion that Chuck Diaz has come up with that allows Americans to say, just a second, you didn't ask me. Just a second, I don't like that policy. Just a second, I do have a problem with my 3-year-old being taught about the viability of homosexuality. And just a second, while we condemned David Duke, let's hear a condemnation in the nation's media for the likes of Louis Farrakhan. Let's hear a condemnation for the Jesse Jacksons and the Maxine Waters, who have had too much power. What power? The power of that lens that's capable of zeroing in not on just faces, but personalities and concepts and weird kinds of thinking that eventually finds themselves in what is written in terms of laws that govern all of us. And the lack of ability of black Americans to speak up to these self-appointed leaders have the entire nation split down the middle according to race. Blacks think one thing, whites think another. But is it really true? Or is it something that someone has told us with a big microphone that we're different? I'm suggesting that you're not. You're not different than me. And I am not different than you. And I want my sons and daughters to learn about certain things in elementary school. And I want to pay less taxes. And I love the hills that brought me from the hotel to this place here that I saw. And the beautiful scenery that makes up Tucson and Arizona and California. I love America. You heard me blacks say that? Listen to it again. I love America. And I don't want America to change. And herein lies the tool, the weapon, that you and I must use. And I'm here to admonish you to begin to use this forum and other forums to speak up. Speak up. Speak up. Thank you.
Emanuel, I think that talk did to me just then what happened when I heard you in Washington, D.C. One of the things that you mentioned in your Washington speech was the control that the churches have in the black communities in the 5 cities. I can't remember exactly how many how many churches there are that you mentioned?
Well, that number changes almost every weekend. A church is going up on some city block somewhere in the inner city. And the reason that the whole subject is important is because there is a movement in this country towards a certain political ideology that we like to think of and label as liberalism. And liberalism has its own characteristics in the black community, some of which is fostered inside black churches. Unlike black churches 100 years ago, today black churches, many of them, have become podiums for which a certain kind of liberalism is postulated, which guides the thinking of its members, and the thinking of its members guide them in the direction that they choose inside the voting booth, which directly affects the kind of policies that we see demanded from the black community, which has, in my view, caused a lot of consternation in terms of America becoming a healthy place.
I think one of the things that got me when you said that was that the ministry within those churches are actually teaching the kids that don't trust Whitey, you're not going to make it, you know, and things like that.
Yes, actually creating the conditions for which they later blame failure in terms of the black community. If you tell a child from the time that the child is 1 year old that America is such a racist place that you cannot possibly make it here in America, then you have an explanation for why 50% of black youths are unemployed and not in school and moving in no particular direction towards a career or anything viable for their lives. And while we like to sit around in some of these places, and I want to suggest to you that black churches are no different than the Congressional Black Caucus, and the Congressional Black Caucus is no different than the NAACP, and the NAACP is no different than the Urban League, all who carry a theme that suggests that America is not the place for black Americans to progress, and America is a place that is sort of a disadvantage to Americans, and yet they are hard-pressed to explain the Emanuel McLittles and the tremendous amount of blacks who are millionaires now, and the insurmountable amount of black professors, and the Walter Williams of the world, and the doctors and the lawyers, and all of those people that have made it.
Okay, I want to continue on that, but right now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back right after this. I'd like to expand on what Emanuel just said in the last segment, and in response to my question about the black churches using that as a platform to teach children that Whitey can't be trusted, and that Whitey is not going to allow you to get anywhere. And I guess if anybody is born and raised in those conditions, they're going to believe it eventually. I remember a long time ago there was a joke that used to go around about what's the first words a Mexican baby hears, and it's attention Kmart shoppers, there's a blue light special. Well, apparently what that means is, or implies, and it's a joke and I think it's funny, but what it implies is that apparently if you're Mexican, the only place you can shop is a Kmart, you know. Yes. Well, in this case here, you know, it's kind of the same thing. The media at the same time certainly doesn't want to tell you any of that. And they certainly don't want to tell you one thing that I happened to read in Emanuel's magazine, and that was that 75% of black males are, and I could imagine that if I were to ask each member of the audience to end that question, 75% of black males are. You'd probably come up with a lot of answers, but I doubt if you'd come up with the real answer. What is it, Emanuel?
Are earning middle-class incomes.
75% of black males are earning middle-class incomes. That's probably the best-kept secret in the world, right? Because they would like you to believe that 75% of black males are either in jail, selling drugs, or doing something else like that.
That's correct.
The other thing is carrying on with this Whitey thing. Scott, bring up the Larry King quote, 1Q2. Larry King. I happened to read this also in Emanuel's magazine, was quoted as saying, First of all, he was asked to define a black conservative. And his quote was, "He is a confused black person wanting to be white." Right? Now, if that isn't...
insulting.
Yeah, it's...
And insulting is a nice word for the kind of thinking inside the head of most liberals who have sort of nursed blacks since the 60s to think, act, and therefore vote in a certain way. And when a black dares to think, act, and vote in a different way, he is somehow or another confused. And this is the surest proof that many of the things that we have thought and done in the black community has not been of our own making. It has been led from behind the scenes by a form of liberalism that has this paternalistic attitude towards blacks that says, in essence, that you are, if you're going to be black, you must think in a certain way, and you must act in a certain way, and you must vote in a certain way, or somehow or another your blackness is brought into question. This does nothing, Chuck, but leads to the kind of division that we have splintering all of the entire country. And if we're going to salvage what is left of our nation, it isn't going to be whites doing the salvaging or blacks doing a separate kind of salvaging or Mexicans doing. It is going to be people of goodwill all over this country having settled their differences and now see the real enemy of freedom as being the kind of politics that goes on only in the Washington Beltway and starts to determine that blacks and white are not each other's enemy, that this political structure that we have allowed to grow to massive, massive size is really our enemy, and that we ought to deal with that, not as blacks or as whites, but as Americans. And nothing is more insulting than to hear excuse me for saying this, but it is mainly a white liberal media that tells me that I ought to identify myself as an African American. And there is nothing more insulting to me than to split my American citizenship between America and Africa. Because I am an America, if there is an American, I am one. And please credit me with it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I know that Larry King on a radio segment that I was going to try to have for this show, but I couldn't really get an okay to play it. He was interviewing Charlie Pride on a radio on a radio show a few weeks ago, and the reason I'm mentioning Larry King is not because I'm picking on him. It's because Larry King is Larry King, and what he does is what he does. All right, but the fact remains is that here's a man who was interviewing Charlie Pride, who happens to be a very, very good a very, very good country western singer.
That's right.
Okay?
And add very successful to that.
Yeah, and they were having people call in, and he asked one of the callers, what's the first thing you think of when you hear the words Charlie Pride? And the caller said, I think of a darn good country western singer that I buy records for. And Larry King called him a liar. He says, you're going to tell me that you don't think of him as a black country western singer? And the guy tried to say that, no. He said, actually, when I go to a record shop, I don't look for a record and say, oh, here's one by a black person. I think I'll buy it.
Yes.
He said, I buy the music that I love.
Yes.
You know, and so when things like that happen, and when Charlie Pride is trying to tell Larry King, when journalists quit asking questions like that,
That's
when
right.
journalists quit putting the separation, when journalists quit saying, how does it feel to be the first black this or the first black that? How about just being the first person that ran the fastest, or the first person that hit the furthest ball, or the first person that did anything?
That's
you
correct.
don't have to be black.
That's
you know
correct.
what I mean? You don't have to be identified that
Yes.
way. Just as an American.
That's right.
All right. We're going to be right back with some questions and answers after this. Be right back. Thank you. Okay, in this segment, everybody, we're going to allow the audience to take part in this thing, and I certainly hope you have some questions. Anybody? I think there was a gentleman over here. Okay, you, sir.
I would like to think that we, the people, have a better understanding of our government. But with all these internationalists that we have who are supposedly American people from the rank and file who go into our government, how do we change their philosophy? It's alien to America. Do you have an answer to that?
Well, I'll go along with that. Do you?
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear your question, but it takes a long time to answer. Because when you say that we have internationalist influence in the policy apparatus on America, you are absolutely accurate. But to identify them is really what we need to start to do. And we need to stop being afraid to criticize those politicians who, even from our own district, are advocating those things that are not in our best interest, because frequently the things that they advocate, the bills that they propose, are in the interests of some of these internationalists and sometimes some of the larger corporations. And I know that's a bad word. You know, conservatives should never criticize large corporations. But there are corporations in this country who have a political agenda, and they sell more than their wares. They sell ideologies. And we need to get to back to the basics of what America was founded for. And if you come to this country from anywhere else in the world, you need to adopt Americanism and not bring together to this country your own thing.
Next question. Yes, sir.
I have a simple question for Mr. McLittle. What is the address of your magazine, Destiny?
We'll get that to you. And I did want to show people Emanuel's magazine, Destiny magazine. Let me tell you right now, every one of you should have 2 publications in your home: Speak Up America and Destiny magazine, and that's a fact. Yes, sir.
Somewhere it says we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities. Now, what does that mean?
What was that question?
Well, I think he said somewhere it's written that we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities. I think on the very practical side, it means that some of those problems that we grapple with as ordinary people who sit at kitchen tables and have our bagels and coffee in the morning, we're wrestling with those kinds of things that are taking place behind the scenes and out of our sight. And you can search all you want for some of the solutions that we need to bring America back to the healthy place that it was 150 years ago. But you won't find them because they're so well hidden. The truth is so camouflaged, and it has been made to look like a lie. And what has to be done is a restoration of the language, the attitude. The good needs to mean good again. A lie needs to be a lie and not look like the truth. And right needs to be right, and there is a definite right and a wrong. We've always known that there's a definite right and a wrong. And to render right and a wrong as an opinion, it doesn't work. So there are institutions that we can restore, linguistic institutions and mental institutions and things sort of like political and psychological cornerstones that we've lived with all of our life on this earth, but in the last 40 years have disappeared. The restoration of that will deal with the unseen forces that I tell you underneath the street in Washington, D.C., pulling your strings.
And also mentioning about the, a truth being a lie or a lie being the truth. I wrote an article recently in Speak Up America about trashing the truth, where
Yes.
the truth has no meaning anymore. It's only the purified opinion that,
Yes.
that seems to win over
Yes.
the audience
Yes.
or the people. Because somebody can make the truest statement on earth, and it'll just lie there in the dirt if somebody else can trash it with a real purified
Yes.
golden statement. Do you have any other questions? Yes, sir, up there on top.
Why is it that the liberals who have been teaching tolerance for years, the minute you disagree with any of those that identify themselves as liberal, they attack you as if you were the enemy of truth?
Well, because what they've been teaching for years is not tolerance. You know, the reason they talk about tolerance is because they know that that word and that concept fits well with American citizens. And what you and I have got to be able to see and learn of late is that everybody that stands in front of a camera and grins at us with straight teeth and sweet smiles are not our friends. And everybody that uses the concepts of good and right and decency can be evil. And that you have to weigh more than what an individual is saying to you at the moment, but what they are doing now, what are the policies that they advocate, and what have they been doing with the rest of their lives. And this is a hot thing in Washington now because we're being asked to forget what Mr. Clinton was. And therefore, if you forget what he was, you have lost 80% of what you need to determine what he is now. So this is a very slick, a very market-oriented kind of philosophy that is surrounding all of our thinking. And there is only one way to turn it around. Enough of us in enough numbers say, that's enough.
Yes, sir.
Emanuel, you used the word gangster when you referred to somebody we had elected to high office. Would you explain that?
Possible gangster. I don't know for a fact that he's a gangster. But those of us in journalism, I don't want to put I never want to put myself beyond you. But we do have information that you don't see. And before the president was elected, the media knew what you are now beginning to hear. And the president should have been elected by you and I based on factual information. But this president, in my view, was elected based on information filtered to you. So the information that you used to elect this president may have been somewhat fraudulent. We're dealing with it in the aftermath now. We should have known all of the things that we're beginning to hear in the beginning so that we could have made a right choice. Now that we've made the wrong choice, we're having to dirty our linen in the eyes of the rest of the world who are snickering at us all along, and therefore has hurt our whole cause from start to finish. And so I don't mind saying that there is a possibility that we may have a gangster in the White House, because the White House is sort of the cockpit, the nucleus of this entire country. And you do not want a dishonest person there that, you know, with the capability of signing the things that he signs and the secrets that he must know and the buttons that he's capable of pushing. You want an angel. You do not want a devil there.
Okay, on that note, we're going to let Emanuel get back to the airport, and we're going to take a break right now, and I'll be back in just a minute. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed Emanuel as much as I did. To kind of wrap this thing up, I'm going to, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, and I went to a high school called Fremont High School, which wasn't very far from the 77th Street Police Station that I referred to in the during the LA riots when I was talking about it earlier. I've had kind of a fantasy of going back to that school, because back then it was probably half white and half black, and today it's probably 90% black. I don't know, but I'd like to go back to that school and give a speech, and I'm going to give that speech that I would give to them. I'd first ask for all the Americans in the audience to stand up. Then I'd ask for all of the Afro-Americans in the audience to stand up, and I think that 90% of the audience would stand up when I said Afro-American. I'd start out by saying, my name is Diaz. That's D-I-A-Z. Sounds foreign, doesn't it? It's not. I'm an American of Mexican descent. I'm not a Mexican-American. I'm not a Hispanic. I'm not an American, and I'm not a Latino. Excuse me. I'm an American whose family happened to come from Mexico. Are you an American? Do you accuse good students of trying to be like Whitey? Do you accuse students who speak correct English of trying to be like Whitey? Do you consider George Washington your hero? Your leaders blame America for your problems. Your leaders tell you the white man's prejudice is the cause of your problems. Look around you. Did the white man's prejudice stop Thomas Bradley from becoming the mayor of Los Angeles? It took white votes for him to do so. Did the white man's prejudice stop Clarence Thomas from becoming a Supreme Court justice? During the Thomas hearings, did you notice the line of well-spoken blacks who testified on behalf of Judge Thomas? Blacks who have made it? Did you wonder how they made it? They made it because they or their parents decided becoming an American is the way you win the game. When all the nationalities that came from Europe came to America, they became American first. They learned the language. They gained an education. They worked very hard to be an American. As a black person, your people didn't come to America as people seeking freedom. They came as slaves. It took America quite a few years to correct that error, but your leaders aren't going to let you forget it. They're certainly not going to let us forget it. They continue to pound into your head that you are different. They fuel the fire for you to invent your own way of talking, your own way of acting, your own way of living, your own heritage. They're telling you that you need to find your own heritage for your self-esteem. They promote black self-esteem with things like Black Entertainment Channel and Black Entertainer Awards and the Black Congressional Caucus. What could possibly be more un-American and racist than that? What your leaders tell you if there were a white, what would your leaders tell you if there were a white entertainment channel or a white caucus? What would they call it? They want you to be everything but an American. You, the poor blacks, are an endangered species. The numbers of middle class and upper middle class blacks are growing, and there are more of them than there are of you. It's the media who targets and presents you as the majority. But then the media perpetuates lies in many areas. You will remain outside looking in as long as you believe what people like Benjamin Hooks are telling you. It's time for you to become an American. It's time for you to start being an American. Accept America, and it'll accept you. Thank you very much. Come on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Let's sing it. Let's sing it. Okay.